We can define business and management research as undertaking systematic Using our earlier definition of research, we can define business and management research as undertaking systematic research to find out things about business and management. Ongoing debate within the literature has explored the transdisciplinary nature of business and management research, its relevance and utility to society, the importance of rigorous methods, and more recently, the need for responsible research in business and management. McKiernan and Sui 2020. Transdisciplinarity. Discussions about the nature of management research consider the transdisciplinary nature, revealing how it also draws on knowledge from a range of other disciplines such as sociology, psychology, and economics, which have different underlying assumptions. They emphasize that the research cannot be reduced to any sum of parts framed in terms of contributions to associated disciplines. Tranfield and Starkey 1998, 352. In other words, using knowledge from a range of disciplines enables management research to gain new insights that cannot be obtained through using these disciplines separately. Relevance and utility. Debates about the relevance and utility of management research highlight a belief that it should have the potential for some form of practical consequences. In other words, it should be relevant to and have the potential to impact upon business and management practice. Here it has been argued that such research should complete a virtuous circle of theory and practice, Tranfield and Starkey 1998, through which research on managerial practice informs practically derived theory. This in turn becomes a blueprint for managerial practice, thereby increasing the stock of relevant and practical management. 6. Business and management research. Knowledge. Thus, business and management research needs to engage with both the world of theory and the world of practice. Consequently, the problems addressed should grow out of interaction between these two worlds rather than on their own. This suggests that managers are less likely to allow research access unless they can see the utility for their organizations or themselves. Rigor. Alongside the relevance debate has been a concern for rigor in both quantitative and qualitative methods. An article by Hodgkinson et al., 2001, offers a useful fourfold taxonomy for considering relevance and rigor in relation to managerial knowledge. Using the dimensions of theoretical and methodological rigor and of practical relevance, as discussed earlier, they identify 4 quadrants. See Table 1.1. Within this, theoretical rigor refers to the clarity and thoroughness and of practical relevance, as discussed earlier, they identify 4 quadrants work. Although part of the same dimension, methodological rigor refers to the strength and quality of the research method used in terms of the planning, data collection, data analysis and subsequent reporting, and therefore the confidence that can be placed in the conclusions drawn. Hodgkinson et al. Argue that pedantic science is characterized by a focus on increasing methodological rigor at the expense of results that are relevant. This can sometimes be found in refereed academic journals. In contrast, popularist science is characterized by a focus on relevance and usefulness while neglecting theoretical and methodological rigor, examples being found in some books targeted at practicing managers. Consequently, while findings might be useful to managers, the research upon which they are based is unlikely to be valid or reliable. Puerile science both lacks methodological rigor and is of limited practical relevance, and although unlikely to be found in refereed academic journals, can be found in other media. Finally, pragmatic science is both theoretically and methodologically rigorous and relevant. Modes of research. Over the past 2 decades, debate about the nature of management research has focused on how it can meet the double hurdle of being both theoretically and methodologically rigorous, while at the same time embracing the world of practice and being of practical relevance. Hodgkinson et al. 2001. Wensley 2011. Practice being reframed recently more broadly than just the world of practice to being socially useful. Hodgkinson and Starkey 2011, and impactful. McIntosh et al. 2017. Recognizing a lack of relevance for much research, debate centered initially around the work by Gibbons et al. 1994 on the Table 1.1a taxonomy for considering the relevance gap in relation to Airy L. led E. Theoretical and methodological rigor, practical relevance quadrant. Higher. Lower. Lower. Higher. Lower. Higher. Lower. Higher. Popularist science. Puerile science. Pragmatic science. Source, developed from Hodgkinson et al., 2001. 7. Chapter 1 Research, Reflective Diaries and the purpose of this book. Production of knowledge and in particular, the concepts of Mode 1 and Mode 2 knowledge creation. Mode 1 knowledge creation emphasizes research in which the questions are set and solved by academic interests, emphasizing a basic rather than applied nature, where there is little, if any, focus on utilization of the research by practitioners. In contrast, Contrast, Mode 2 emphasizes a context for research governed by the world of practice, highlighting the importance of collaboration both with and between practitioners, Starkey and Mudden 2001, and the need for the production of practical relevant knowledge. Based upon this, Starkey and Mudden, 2001, observe that research within the Mode 2 approach offers a way of bringing the knowledge created in universities together with the needs of businesses, thereby overcoming the double hurdle. Bresnan and Burrell, 2012, 25, suggest a further alternative, which they consider is a more insidious form of knowledge production. This form, termed Mode 0 knowledge creation, they argue has been around since the 17th century. It refers to knowledge production based on power and patronage, being particularly visible in the close relationships between sponsor and researcher, for example pharmaceutical industry sponsorship of medical research. Drawing upon these debates, it could be argued that business and management research not only needs to provide findings that advance knowledge and understanding in this subject area, but it also needs to address business issues and practical managerial problems. However, this would negate the observation that Mode 2 practices develop from Mode 1. It might also result in business and management research that appears to have little obvious commercial benefit being ignored. This, Huff and Huff, 2001, argue could jeopardize future knowledge creation, because as highlighted in the opening vignette, research that is initially not of commercial value can have value in the future. Building upon these ideas, Huff and Huff highlight a further form of knowledge production, Mode 3. Mode 3 Knoll Edge production focuses on an appreciation of the human condition as it is, and as it might become, its purpose being to assure survival and promote the common good at various levels of social aggregation. Huff and Huff 2001, 53. In other words, the research is of benefit to humankind rather than business. This emphasizes the importance of broader issues of the wider implications of research, and we consider links to the idea of research being of benefit to society in general rather than just business. Consequently, in addition to research that satisfies your intellectual curiosity for its own sake, the findings of Bussey Ness and management research might also contain practical implications, which may be far broader and complex than perhaps envisaged by Mode 2. The relevance gap. Tranfield and Denier, 2004, draw attention to concerns resulting from the separation of knowledge producers from knowledge users. This has introduced a schism, or what Starkey and Mudden, 2001, call the relevance gap, which has been the subject of considerable debate. Rousseau, 2006, has drawn attention to ways of closing what she terms the prevail-ing research practice gap, the failure of organizations and managers to base practices on the best available evidence. She extols the virtues of evidence-based management, which derives principles from research evidence and translates them into practices that solve organizational problems. Research findings do not appear to have transferred well to the workplace. Instead of a scientific understanding of human behavior and organizations, managers, including those with MBAs, continue to rely largely on personal experience, to the exclusion of more systematic knowledge. Within these debates, some maintain that the gap between academic research and practice is fundamentally unbridgeable because management researchers and the researched inhabit different worlds, are engaged in different activities, and have different research orientations, while others disagree. Hodgkinson. 8. Business and management research. And Rousseau, 2009, for example, argue that the research practice gap is due to more than differences in style and language, and that management researchers can generate knowledge that is both useful to society and academically rigorous. Not surprisingly, many managers and academics perceive the gap between research undertaken by academics and management as practiced as problematic. Saunders, 2011, categorizes these as differences between academics and practitioners' orientations in relation to their foci of interest, methodological imperatives, the key outcomes, and how each views the other. These we summarize in Table 1.2, the contrasting orientations indicating where tensions may occur. However, perhaps the most telling comment on the so-called relevance gap is from Tranfield and Denier, 2004, 13, who assert that ignoring such a gap would be unthinkable in other professional fields, such as medicine or engineering, where a national scandal would ensue if science base and practice were not inextricably and necessarily interlinked. This relates to the idea of conceptualizing management as a design science rather than a social science. From the design science perspective, the main purpose of academic management research is to develop valid knowledge to support organizational problem solving. Many researchers would probably agree that the purpose of management research, like other social sciences, can be undertaken from a wide variety of perspectives involving exploration, description, evaluation, explanation, and prediction. However, taking a design science perspective focuses upon solution-oriented research to develop valid knowledge which supports practitioners in solving business problems. Van Aken 2005. The counter-argument proposes that management practice is characterized by a wide variety of organizational phenomena that are often ambiguous and may not be suited to rule-like explanations offered by design science, and that there needs to be a balance between the Different purposes of research and a need for application, Panza and Thorpe 2010. Responsible research in business and management. The creation of the Community for Responsible Research in Business and Management, CRRBM, provided further impetus. They emphasized that findings needed to be both credible, drawn from research undertaken rigorously, and applicable, relevant to practice if business and management research was to be useful to society, McKiernan and Suey 2020. Table 1.2 Practitioner and Management Researcher Orientations. Management Researcher Practitioner. Basic understanding, general enlightenment, theoretical explanation, why knowledge, substantive theory building. Theoretical and EDLICL RER. Academic publication. Disdain of practitioner, desire to make a difference, PRC ICE. AUKUS of interest. Methodological imperative. Key outcome. IES of OTR. Usable knowledge, instrumental practical problem solutions, how to knowledge, local theory in use. Timeliness. Actionable results with practice impact. Deprecate or ignore belief, research can provide relevant, socially useful, fresh insights to managers' problems. Source, developed from Saunders, 2011. 9. Chapter 1 Research, Reflective Diaries and the purpose of this book. Table 1.3 Community for Responsible Research in Business and Management's 7 Principles of Responsible Research. 1. Service to society. Research aims to develop knowledge that benefits business and the broader society locally and globally to create a better world. Improving rigor, ensuring relevance. 2. Valuing both basic and applied contributions. Contributions of both basic and applied research are recognized. 3. Valuing plurality and multidisciplinary collaboration. Diversity in research themes, methods, forms of scholarship, types of inquiry, and interdisciplinary collaboration reflect plurality and complexity of societal and business problems and are valued. 4. Sound methodology uses sound scientific methods and processes in both quantitative and qualitative, or both theoretical and empirical domains. 5. Stakeholder involvement. Different stakeholders can play critical role without compromising independence or autonomy of the research. 6. Impact on stakeholders. Research that has an impact on diverse stakeholders, especially contributing BERB IEDB or RLDI rewarded. 7. Broad dissemination. Diverse forms of knowledge dissemination that collectively advance basic knowledge and practice are valued. Source, developed from McKiernan and Suey, 2020. Their objective is to change research practice for a better science and towards having a greater impact, especially on society as a whole. McKiernan and Suey 2020, page 491. CRRBM offers 7 principles to guide research and ensure it is both credible in terms of a rigorous method and methodology, and relevant to society. Table 1.3. Of these, Principle 1, Service to Society, is considered core, developing knowledge that creates a better world. Principles 2 to 4, left column, are concerned with aspects of methodological rigor in research, whereas Principles 5 to 7 focus on ensuring research is relevant to society. As you digest these 7 principles, think about how they relate to both the earlier debates we have outlined and your own beliefs regarding how business and management research should be undertaken. Box 1.2. Basic and applied research. Table 1.3 highlights responsible research in business and management, valuing both basic and applied contributions, and thus although the immediate purpose and the context of your research project can differ considerably, it can still benefit broader society. For some research projects, your purpose may be to understand and explain the impact of something, such as a particular policy. You may undertake this research within an individual organization and suggest appropriate action based on your findings. For other research projects, you may wish to explore the ways in which various organizations do things differently. In such projects, your purpose may be to discover and understand better the underlying processes in a wider context, thereby providing greater understanding for practitioners. For yet other research projects, you may wish to place an in-depth investigation of an organization within the context of a wider understanding of the processes that are operating. Despite this variety, we believe that all business and management research projects can be placed on a continuum, figure 1.1, according to their purpose and context. At 1. 10. Business and management research. Box 1.2. AUKUS on management research. Responsible research. In an article in Academy of Management Discoveries, SUI, 2021, discusses the necessary interdependence, page 166, of rigor and relevance, and shows how the 7 principles of responsible research can guide studies of responsible leadership. Within this she outlines how each of these principles applies to the study of responsible leadership, posing a series of illustrative questions that can be considered when designing responsible leadership studies. She notes that while a study may not meet all of the basic research 7 principles, using them as a guide to research design will increase the probability that the findings will be credible in terms of rigor and useful in terms of relevance. SUI stresses that the Community for Responsible Research in Business and Management aims to move research practices from their focus on the interests of researchers and their universities to a focus on the ultimate users of research knowledge. These include managers, policymakers, and students. She concludes that for business and management, research should produce credible knowledge to enable all types of organizations to effect positive change for a better world. Within this she notes that responsible leadership offers a promising area in which to apply the principles of responsible research. SUI 2021, page 1. Purpose: expand knowledge of processes of business and management. Purpose: applied research. Improve understanding of particular business or management problem. Results in universal principles relating to the process and its relationship to outcomes of significance and value to society in general context, undertaken by people based in academia. Choice of topic and objectives determined by the researcher. Exable timescales. Impact. Results in solution to problem. New knowledge limited to problem of practical relevance and value to managers in organizations. Context. Undertaken by people based in a variety of settings including organizations and academia. Objectives negotiated with originator. Tight timescales. Impact. Initially academic community and researcher may also impact policy and practice. Figure 1.1 Basic and applied research. Initially policy and practice community and researcher may also impact academia. Sources: Author's Experience, Easterby Smith et al., 2021, Hedrick et al., 1993, McIntosh et al., 2017. Extreme of the continuum is research that is undertaken purely to understand the processes of business and management and their outcomes. Such research is undertaken largely in universities and largely as the result of an academic agenda. Its key impact is 11. Chapter 1 Research, Reflective Diaries and the purpose of this book. Within the academic community, with relatively little attention being given to relevance to or impact on practice. This is often termed basic, fundamental or pure research, and although the focus may not have been on practical or commercial value, the resultant model may be of considerable utility, having impact in both academic and practitioner communities. Given our earlier discussion, it is unlikely that Mode 2 and Mode 3 business and management research would fulfill the criterion of being undertaken purely to understand, due to at least some consideration being given to the practical consequences of what has been found out. Through considering the practical consequences, the research would start to move towards the other end of the continuum. Figure 1.1. At this end is research that is impactful for practitioner communities, being of direct and immediate use to managers, addresses issues that they see as important, and is presented in ways that they understand and can act on. This is termed applied research. In our view, applied research can be very similar to consultancy, particularly when the latter is conducted in a thorough manner. Wherever your research project lies on this basic applied continuum, and for each of the orientations in Table 1.2, we believe that you should undertake your research with rigor. To do this you will need to pay careful attention to the entire research process. 1 point for the research process. Most research textbooks represent research as a multi-stage process that you must follow to undertake and complete your research project. The precise number of stages varies, but they usually include formulating and clarifying a topic, reviewing the literature, designing the research, collecting data, analyzing data, and writing up. In the majority of these, the research process, although presented with rationalized examples, is described as a series of stages through which you must pass. Articles you have read may also suggest that the research process is rational and straightforward. Unfortunately, this is very rarely true, and the reality is considerably messier, with what initially appear as great ideas sometimes having little or no relevance. While research is often depicted as moving through each of the stages just outlined, one after the other, this is unlikely to be the case. In reality, some stages will overlap, and you will probably revisit each stage more than once. Each time you revisit a stage, you will need to reflect on the associated issues and refine your ideas. Alongside this, you will need to consider ethical and access issues during the process. This book also presents the research process as a series of linked stages and gives the appearance of being organized in a linear manner. However, as you use the book, you will see that we recognize the concurrent and iterative nature of the research process you will follow in the examples of research by academic researchers, student research, how research is reported in the news and case studies, as well as our extensive use of cross-referencing. As part of this process, we believe it is vital that you spend time formulating and clarifying your research topic. This, we believe, should be expressed as one overarching research question that your research must answer, or an aim your research will address. These will be accompanied by a set of objectives or investigative questions. However, we would also stress the need to reflect on your ideas continually and revise both these and the way in which you intend to progress your research. We believe regular writing is an intrinsic part of developing your ideas and understanding your research. Indeed, we and our students have found that it is not until we write our ideas that we discover where our arguments need further clarification. Often this will involve revisiting stages, including research questions and objectives, and working through them again. There is also a need to plan ahead, thereby ensuring that 12. The research process. 13. Figure 1.2 The research process. Source: Copyright Mark Saunders, Philip Lewis and Adrian Thornhill 2022. Readingt ECI. EOEY Re RCI DDLP EPRPL Chapter 2. Critic LLY Review TE Literature Chapter 3. Understand your P ILOSOP Y and APRO C Chapter 4. Begin to ink about Reset RC. Forward planning re-action and revision. Formulate your Reset RC design Chapter 5. Analyze your data IT or bot. Quantitatively Chapter 12. Plan your data collection and collect data. Sampling Chapter 7, Secondary Data Chapter 8. Observation Chapter 9, Interviews and Reset RC Diaries Chapter 10. Questionnaires Chapter 11. Qualitatively Chapter 13. Write your project report and prepare your presentation Chapter 4. Submit your project report. Chapter 1 Research, Reflect. The necessary preliminary work for later stages has been undertaken. This is emphasized by Figure 1.2, which also provides a schematic index to the remaining chapters of the book. Within this flowchart, Figure 1.2, the stages you will need to complete as part of your research project are emphasized in the center of the chart. However, be warned, the process is far messier than a brief glance at Figure 1.2 suggests. 1.5 Keeping a reflective diary or research notebook. You will notice in Figure 1.2 we include a series of arrows labeled Reflection and Revision. During your research project you will find it helpful to keep a separate reflective diary or reflective journal. The terms are used interchangeably. In your diary you can note down what has happened and the lessons you have learned, both from things that have gone well and things that have not gone so well during the research process, on a regular basis. Others keep a learning journal, which uses a more free-flowing structure to describe, analyze and evaluate what has happened. Some researchers incorporate their reflective diary or journal into a research notebook in which they chronologically record other aspects of their research project, such as useful articles they have read, notes of discussions with their project tutor, and other interesting conversations alongside their emergent thoughts about all aspects of their research. We have also found this helpful. The process of observing your own research practice and examining the way you do things is termed reflection. However, there is a more complex recursive process incorporating interpretation, as well as reflection, and involving you in thinking about your experiences and questioning the way you have done things. This process, known as reflexivity, involves you being constantly aware of your effects on your research. You should therefore be thinking about and interpreting your role in the research, and the way in which this is influenced by the object of the research, and acknowledging the way you affect both the processes of the research and the outcomes, and how they have affected you. Corlett and Maven 2018, Box 1.3, Section 13.5. Lincoln et al., 2018, 124, define reflexivity as the process of reflecting critically on the self as researcher. As we say elsewhere in this book, research is like going on a journey. It is a journey that involves you making a number of decisions. Being reflexive will ensure you reflect on why and how you develop your research idea, why you prefer one research strategy over another, how you engage with those whom you wish to take part in your research, how you use the data they reveal to you, how you deal with any problems that confront you during your project, and so on. It will allow you to surface any preconceived ideas that you may have about your topic, and what you expect to find, and help you to be aware of your own biases. Through doing this you will recognize your role or self within the process of the research, remaining critically reflective and being open to new learning. Critical reflectivity may be approached not just through an introspective examination of the ways your attitudes and actions affect your role as researcher, but also in relation to the way broader social assumptions and context may influence it. Charmas 2017. Many preconceived ideas and personal biases have a social basis. This can have consequences for the research environment in terms of the need for researchers not only to reflect on their own predilections, preconceived ideas and bias, but also on those of potential participants in a research project. Such reflections are likely to also be appropriate as you undertake your research project. You will almost certainly remember from your earlier studies the work of Kolb and of Honey and Mumford on the learning cycle, Marchington et al. 2021. This views the learning process as going through a four-stage cycle of 14. Keeping a reflective diary or research notebook. Box 1.3. AUKUS on student research. EEING a Reflect EE diary as art of a research notebook. As part of her master's research project, Amanda's project tutor had encouraged her to incorporate her reflective diary into a research notebook. Over time, she began to realize that her diary entries were providing her with a useful way of not only recording her experiences, but also questioning her research practice. An extract from her reflective diary follows. Monday, April 6, 7:30 p.m. I did my first observation today in a shop, watching and recording what people did when they came in, browsed the shoes and then, perhaps, made a purchase and left. Following what the textbook had told me, I sat as unobtrusively as possible in the corner, on one of the sofas, and used my tablet to make notes about the customers and the sales assistant's behaviors. I'd prepared a checklist of what I was looking for. It all seemed to go well, and using the checklist, I made some interesting observations about the sorts of interactions customers were having with the sales assistants when they purchased shoes. Also, I feel my position was unobtrusive, and I was not really noticed. What went less well was the fact I could not hear precisely what was being said. I was too far away from the sales assistant and the customer. I need to make adjustments and be closer next time, while still being unobtrusive. 10 p.m. Feeling worried that I might not have really observed all of what was happening. The program makers had filmed the same purchase in a shop from 3 different views, presumably using different cameras. One camera filmed the purchase from low down, and appeared to be quite a distance from the purchase. It seemed as if the camera operator was sitting on a sofa, rather like my observation. Another had filmed it more closely from behind the sales assistant, so you could see the expressions on the customer's face, and easily hear the conversation. The final camera had filmed from behind the customer, and this time, you could see the sales assistant's face. She looked really disinterested. I had never really thought about the impact of my posy tie-in in the shop on what I would see, and the data I would be able to collect until I saw that program. ELEOSO. Tuesday, April 7th, 7:30 a.m. On reflection, I really need to think more carefully about where would be the best place from which to observe and collect my data. I have already thought about the data I need, but given my emphasis on the interaction with customers, I think I was not in the right place to collect it for my first observation. I need to be able to see both the customer and the sales assistant and to hear what is being said and the tones of the voices. But at the same time, I need to be unobtrusive as well, so my presence does not influence the interaction. Also, there is also only one of me, so I cannot be in 3 places at once. However, if I remember correctly, there was a place to sit and try on shoes next to the sales desk. Perhaps that would be a better place to observe. I cannot use videography to record what is happening as, if I ask for permission to do this, it will completely change the way the people react with each other. However, I have just watched a television documentary on retail shopping and the changing nature of such shops. I'm OLOEOASAEA afterwards. I'll talk to my project tutor. EAEL. 1 concrete experience, 2 observation and reflection in relation to the experience, 3 forming abstract concepts and generalizations from these observations and reflections, for testing these concepts and generalizations in new situations. The learning cycle emphasizes that for learning to happen you need to pass through the complete cycle, as without reflection there will be no learning from experience. Such. 15. Chapter 1 Research, Reflective Diaries and the Purpose of this book. Box 1.4. 1.4. Checklist of questions to as yourself and making reflective diary entries in relation to EACE arians. Heavy checkmark. What has gone well? Why has it gone well? Heavy checkmark. What has not gone so well? Why has it not gone so well? So what does this mean in relation to my research? Heavy checkmark. What adjustments will / did I make to my research following my reflection? OOINGAC. Heavy checkmark. How could I have improved on the adjustments made? So what does this mean in relation to my research? Why? Heavy checkmark. What key themes have emerged over several entries? Heavy checkmark. How will I apply what I have learned from each experience to new situations? Reflection is the process of stopping and thinking about a concrete experience that has happened or is happening, and the subsequent forming of concepts and generalizations, so you can apply what you have learned from your experiences to new situations. In other words, you need to have an inquiring imagination and persistently ask yourself why, what if, and so what. Gabriel 2015. Given the benefits to learning, it is not surprising that many universities require students to write a reflective essay or a reflective practice statement as part of the assessment for their research project. To do this well, and more importantly to enhance your learning during the research process, we recommend that you keep a reflective diary, research notebook, or learning journal. You should write in this frequently regarding what has gone well, what has gone less well, what you have learned from each experience, and how you will apply this learning in the future. Box 1.3. Indeed, as you read on you will find that we ask you to do this at the end of each chapter in the section Progressing Your Research Project. Questions our students have found helpful to guide them when writing their diary entries are listed as a checklist in box 1.4. Be warned, many students forget to write in their reflective diaries regularly. This makes writing a good reflective essay difficult as much of the learning will have been forgotten. 1.6 The purpose and structure of this book. The purpose. As we stated earlier, section 1.1, the overriding purpose of this book is to help you to undertake research. This means that early on in your research project you will need to be clear about what you are doing, why you are doing it, and the associated implications of what you are seeking to do. You will also need to ensure that you can show how your ideas relate to research that has already been undertaken in your topic area, and that you have a clear research design, and have thought about how you will collect and analyze your data. As part of this you will need to consider the validity and reliability, or credibility and dependability, of the data you intend to use, along with associated ethical and access. 16. The purpose and structure of this book. Issues. The appropriateness and suitability of the analytical techniques you choose to use will be of equal importance. Finally, you will need to write and present your research project report as clearly and precisely as possible, making sure you meet all your University of CITES assessment criteria. The structure of each chapter. Each of the subsequent chapters deals with part of the research process outlined in Figure 1.2. The ideas, methods, and techniques are discussed using appropriate terms, but as little jargon as possible. Where appropriate, you will find summaries of these, using tables, checklists, or diagrams. When new terms are introduced for the first time, they are shown in bold, and a definition or explanation follows shortly afterwards. They are also listed with a brief definition in the glossary. The use of appropriate information technology is considered in most instances as an integral part of the book. Discussion of information technology is not software specific, but is concerned with general principles. However, we recognize that you may wish to find out more about how to use data analysis software packages, and so have included tutorials for the quantitative data analysis software IBM SPSS Statistics and the spreadsheet Excel with practice data sets on this book's compan. ION website. These will enable you to utilize whatever software you have available most effectively. We have also included the Smarter Online Searching Guide to help you with your online searches. Sections and chapters have been cross-referenced as appropriate, and an index is provided to help you to find your way around the book. Included within each chapter are one or more boxes titled Focus on Student Research. These, like box 1.3, reflect actual research projects undertaken by students in which points made in the book are illustrated. In many instances these examples illustrate POS-CIBL pitfalls you may come across while undertaking your research. Further illustrations are provided by Focus on Management Research and Focus on Research in the news boxes. Focus on Management Research boxes, such as box 1.2, discuss recent research in business and management. These are normally derived from refereed academic journal articles, and you are likely to be able to download the actual articles from online databases at your university. Focus on research in the news boxes, one of which you will have already read. Box 1.1, offer abridged versions of topical newspaper articles that illustrate pertinent research-related issues. All these will help you to understand the technique or idea and to assess its suitability or appropriateness for your research. Where a pitfall has been illustrated, it is hoped, help you to avoid making the same mistake. There is also a series of box checklists, such as box 1.4, to provide you with further focus guidance for your own research. At the end of each chapter there is a summary of key points, which you may look at before and after reading the chapter to ensure you digest the main points. To enable you to check that you have understood the chapter, a series of self-check questions is included at the end. These can be answered without recourse to other extra NAL resources. Answers are provided to all these self-check questions at the end of each chapter. Self-check questions are followed by review and discussion questions. These suggest a variety of activities you can undertake to help you further develop your knowledge and understanding of the material in the chapter, often involving discussion with a friend. Self-test multiple choice questions with feedback are available on this book's companion website. Each chapter also includes a section towards the end headed Progressing Your Research Project. This contains a series of tasks that will help you to consider the implications of the material covered by the chapter for your research project. Undertaking the tasks in the section Progressing Your Research Project for each chapter will enable you to generate all the material that you will need to include in your project report and where. 17. Chapter 1 Research, Reflective Diaries and the purpose of this book. Required, your reflective statement. These tasks involve you in undertaking activities that are more complex than self-check questions, such as an online literature search or design and piloting a questionnaire. They are designed to help you to focus on the aspects that are most appropriate to your research project. However, as emphasized by Figure 1.2, you will almost certainly need to revisit and revise your answers as your research progresses. Each chapter is also accompanied by references, further reading, and a case study. Further reading is included for two distinct reasons. To direct you to other work on the ideas and concepts contained within the chapter. To direct you to further examples of research where the ideas contained in the chapter have been used. The main reasons for our choice of further reading are therefore indicated. The new case studies towards the end of every chapter are drawn from a variety of business and management research scenarios, and have been based on the case studies authors and students' experiences when undertaking a research project. All case studies have been written to highlight real issues that occur when undertaking business and management research. To help to focus your thoughts or discussion on some of the pertinent issues, each case is followed by evaluative questions. The additional case studies listed for each chapter are available from the book's companion website. This provides hyperlinks to over 80 additional case studies. An outline of the chapters. The book is organized in the following way. Chapter 2 is written to assist you in the generation of ideas, which will help you to identify a suitable research topic and offers advice on what makes a good research topic. If you have already been given a research topic, perhaps by an organization or tutor, you will need to refine it into one that is feasible and should still therefore read this chapter. After your idea has been generated and refined, the chapter discusses how to turn this idea into an overarching research questions, aim, and objectives. Finally, the chapter provides advice on how to develop your research proposal. The importance of critically reviewing the literature for your research is discussed in Chapter 3. This chapter commences by explaining what is meant by critical when reviewing literature. The chapter explains the purpose of reviewing the literature, highlighting the content and possible structures, the range of secondary and gray literature. Sources are outlined and a range of strategies discussed, including the use of systematic review methodology. We also offer advice on how to plan and conduct your searches using online databases and search engines, and how to record or reference items, evaluate their relevance, and subsequently draft your critical review, acknowledging the work of others to avoid plagiarism. Chapter 4 introduces the conceptualization of the research process as peeling layers from a research onion. We start with the outermost layer considering 5 different research philosophies, including positivism, critical realism, interpretivism, postmodernism, and pragmatism. Within this, the functionalist, interpretive, radical humanist, and radical structuralist paradigms are discussed. The next layer considers deductive, inductive, abductive, and retroductive approaches to theory development. In this chapter, we challenge you to think about your own values and beliefs reflexively and the impact this will have on the way you undertake your research. These ideas are developed further in Chapter 5, which, using the next 3 layers of the research onion, explores formulating your research design. Research design is the way you 18. The purpose and structure of this book. Turn your overarching research question, or aim, and your objectives into a research project. In this chapter we start with the methodological choice layer. This comprises quantitative, qualitative, multiple, and mixed methods, and within this, whether your research is exploratory, descriptive, explanatory, or evaluative. Next we explore the research strategy layer considering experiment, survey, ethnography, grounded theory, narrative inquiry, archival research, case study, and action research strategies. This is followed by a discussion of the time horizon layer focusing upon when to adopt a cross-sectional or longitudinal design. Consideration is also given to the implications of research design for the quality of your research findings and conclusions. Chapters 6 to 13 are concerned with aspects associated with obtaining or collecting data collection and its subsequent analysis, the core of the research onion. Chapter 6 explores issues related to negotiating access and to research ethics. It offers advice on how to gain physical and cognitive access both to organizations and to individuals using both traditional and internet-mediated and hybrid approaches. Potential ethical issues are discussed in relation to each stage of the research process and different data collection methods, stressing the need to research ethically. Issues of data protection are also introduced. A range of the probability and non-probability sampling techniques available for use in your research is explained in Chapter 7. The chapter considers why sampling may be necessary, how to determine an appropriate sample size, and likely response rates for both probability and non-probability samples. Advice on how to relate your choice of sampling techniques to your research topic is given, and techniques for assessing the representativeness of those who respond are discussed. The extent to which it is reasonable to generalize from a sample is also assessed. Chapters 8, 9, 10, and 11 are concerned with different methods of obtaining or collect data. The obtaining and evaluating of secondary data is discussed in Chapter 8. This chapter introduces the variety of survey, document, text, audio, and visual, and multiple source data that are likely to be available, suggesting ways in which they can be used. Advantages and disadvantages of secondary data are discussed, and a range of procedures for locating these data is suggested. Chapter 8 provides an indication of the myriad of sources available online, and also offers advice on how to evaluate the suitability of SEC ONDRI data for your research. In contrast, Chapter 9 is concerned with collecting primary data using observation. The chapter examines 3 types of observation: participant observation, structured observation, and internet-mediated observation, as well as the use of videography, audio recordings, and static images in the collection of observational data. Practical advice on using each is offered, and particular attention is given to ensuring that data are obtained ethically. Chapter 10 is also concerned with collecting primary data, this time using interviews and diaries. The appropriateness of using different structures, modes, and mediums of interview in relation to your research strategy is discussed. Advice is offered on how to undertake one-to-one semi-structured or in-depth interviews online, as well as face-to-face and by telephone. Advice is also offered for conducting one-to-many and two-to-many group interviews and focus groups online and face-to-face. Visual interviews are discussed along with ways to conduct these online and face-to-face. We also consider the use of both quantitative and qualitative research diaries. Chapter 11 is the final chapter concerned with collecting primary data. It introduces you to the use of both self-completed and interviewer-completed questionnaires and explores their advantages and disadvantages. Practical advice is offered on the process of design, piloting and delivering online, SMS, text, postal, delivery and collection, telephone, and face-to-face questionnaires to enhance their response rates. Within this we consider the use of images in questionnaires. 19. Chapter 1 Research, Reflective Diaries and the purpose of this book. Analysis of data is covered in Chapters 12 and 13. Chapter 12 outlines and illustrates the main issues that you need to consider when preparing and analyzing data quantitatively. Different types of data variable are defined, and advice is given on how to categorize and code text and visual data, including using content analysis, and create a data matrix. Practical advice is also offered on the analysis of these data using statistical analysis software. The most appropriate diagrams to explore and illustrate data are discussed, and suggestions are made about the most appropriate statistics to use to describe data, to examine associations and differences and strength of relationships, and make predictions and examine trends. Chapter 13 outlines and discusses the main approaches available to you to prepare and analyze data qualitatively both manually and using computer-aided qualitative data analysis software, CAPTAs. The diverse nature of qualitative data and issues associated with transcription are considered. Several analytical aids that will help you analyze data and record your ideas as you progress your research are outlined. The use of deductively based and inductively based analytical approaches is discussed, and a variety of techniques are outlined to analyze text, audio, and visual qualitative data. Chapter 14 helps you with the structure, content, and style of your final project report, and any associated online or face-to-face oral and poster presentations. Possible structures for both academic and practitioner, consultancy, project reports are discussed, and alternative ways of presenting quotations from interviews outlined. Above all, and as illustrated by Figure 1.2, it encourages you to see writing as a daily activity and an intrinsic part of the research process that should not be left until everything else is completed. Appendices and glossary. This book contains 3 appendices designed to support you at different stages of your research project. In the early stages, as you begin to read, you will need to keep a reference of what you have read using a recognized system, the most frequently used of which are detailed in Appendix 1. When selecting your sample, you may need to calculate the minimum sample size required and use random sampling numbers Appendix 2. Finally, when designing your data collection tools and writing your project report, you will need to ensure that the language you use is non-discriminatory. Guidelines for this are given in Appendix 3. A separate glossary of over 750 research methods related terms is also included for quick reference. 1.7 Summary. This book is designed to help you to undertake a research project whether you are an undergraduate or postgraduate student of business and management or a practicing manager. It is designed as an introductory textbook and to support you through the entire research process. Business and management research involves undertaking systematic research to find out things. It is transdisciplinary and engages with both theory and practice. All business and management research projects can be placed on a basic applied continuum according to their purpose and context. Wherever your research project lies on this continuum, you should undertake your research with rigor and try to ensure it benefits broader society. To do this, you will need to pay careful attention to the entire research process. 20. EIE and discussion questions. To enhance your learning during your research, we recommend you keep a reflective diary or notebook. In this book, research is represented as a multi-stage process. However, this process is rarely straightforward and will involve both reflecting on and revising stages already undertaken as well as forward planning. The text of each chapter is supported through a series of boxed examples. These include focus on student research, focus on management research, and focus on research in the news. In addition, there are checklists, self-check questions and review and discussion questions, an assignment to progress your research project, and a case study with questions. Answers to all self-check questions are at the end of the appropriate chapter. Answering the questions in the section Progressing Your Research Project for chapters 1 to 1 will enable you to generate all the material that you will need to include in your project report. And reflect on what you have learned. When you have also answered the questions in this SEC time for chapter 1, you will have written your research report. Self-check questions. Help with these questions is available at the end of the chapter. 1.1 1.2 1.3 Outline the features that can make business and management research distinctive from research in other disciplines. What are the key differences between basic and applied research and consultancy? Examine IGUR 1.2. What does this suggest about the need to plan and to reflect on and revise your ideas? EIE and discussion questions. 1.4 1.5 1.6 Agree with a friend to each read a different quality newspaper. Make a note of at least 10 articles in your newspaper that mention the word research. Now examine the articles one at a time. As you examine each article, does the reference to research refer to the collection of facts or information with no clear purpose? Refer to the reassembling and reordering of facts or information without interpretation. Provide a means of getting the reader to respect what is being written. Refer to the systematic collection and interpretation of data with a clear purpose. Discuss your answers with your friend. Reread Section 1. Paying particular attention to the community for responsible research in business and management. 7 principles of responsible research outlined in Table 1. To what extent does each relate to how you believe business and management research should be undertaken? Revisit Table 1.2 and look at the differences in management researcher and practitioner orientations for foci of interest, methodological imperatives, key outcomes, and how each views the other. For each of the continua implied by this table, where would you place yourself? To what extent do you believe that business and management research should meet the practitioner requirements? Give reasons for your answer. 21. Chapter 1 Research, Reflective Diaries, and the purpose of this book. Progressing your research project. Starting your reflective diary or notebook. Find out if your university requires you to write a reflective practice statement, learning journal, or keep a reflective diary or research notebook as part of your research project or research methods module. Ensure that your reflective diary or research notebook entries will enable you to meet fully the assessment criteria. Be sure to ascertain whether you are expected to be reflective or reflexive. When doing this, amend the questions in box 1 to guide your diary or notebook entries as necessary. If the answer is yes, look carefully at precisely what is required by the assessment criteria and references. If the answer is no, we still believe it will be beneficial to your learning for your research project or research methods module if you keep a reflective diary or research notebook on a regular basis. The questions in box 1 may help guide your reflective entries at the end of each chapter. Bresnan, M. and Burrell, G. 2012, Journals a la Mode. 20 Years of Living Alongside Mode 2 and the New Production of Knowledge, Organization, Volume 20, Number 1, pages 25-7.